We are live. If you're new to the live stream today, welcome to hour 8 as part of the live streaming party for my book, Right for Money Empowered. We just became a #1 Amazon bestseller earlier today. Yay! But I am so excited to be joined by Grace. So for those of you who don't know her, I'm excited to welcome back Grace Abbott to the live stream. Grace is the creator of How to Go Freelance, a Substack and community for freelancers and creatives who want more freedom, more money, and a more intentional way of working. And after a decade as a freelance creative, Grace has built a flexible, abundant life and now shares practical and kind of the spiritual side of freelancing through her writing, co-working sessions, and office hours. Grace, I'm so excited to have you back.
Yes, thank you. And congratulations on your book. This is so exciting.
Yeah, thank you. And so one of the things that we've been kind of asking different guests on today, or I've been asking, I say we, but it's, it's the hour 8 getting to me. One of the things I wanted to ask you is this idea of what, before last time you were on the show, you were talking about creative tactics for freelancers into 2026. Zooming out a bit, when you think about creative power now going into this year, what does that phrase mean for you, both in your career and looking forward?
Yeah. I like to think of creativity as, this sort of pure potential that we can always tap into. And when I step into a space that's like deconditioned from like what's worked in the past or what I think I should be doing or what other people are doing and kind of anchor into like the quiet um, center within me where I can access like, this is the right next step or this is the new creative thing I want to write. That's really what I'm trying to connect to this year. So, data and all that stuff is important, but the more we can get quiet and tap into like the pure potential within us, that's kind of where I want to be.
I love that. And that's almost kind of talking a little bit adjacent to intuition a little bit too, and kind of trying to tap into that inner voice and what it's saying. And one of the things I thought was interesting in our past conversation and the way that you write on your Substack is that you've mentioned in the past that no traditional role or job could have really held you.
Yeah.
Looking back, what do you feel like freelancing has given you that no salary job could have ever done?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like a total cowboy and I just don't want to anybody to tell me what I have to do or when I have to do it or I'm stuck in this little box. And so what freelance has given me is the opportunity to explore a lot of different things. So, I might be in a creative role with someone, I might be in a marketing role with someone, I might be doing a one-off strategy role or a website. And so I really wanted that freedom of being able to experiment with different types of roles and jobs and ways of scoping. And so I love that. And I think also being able to flex in all areas of business. I don't mind doing my expenses. I like coming up with a business plan. Like it's always creative and there's always different ways to engage myself with a freelance career as opposed to just showing up every day to do one job over and over again.
I love that. And I love that the description of like yourself as a cowboy. Like I
Yeah.
totally see it.
Uh-huh.
It kind of feels like you're in the wild west as a free. I feel like that, like I felt this way too, is like sometimes being freelancing is like you're in the wild west and like everybody else has day jobs. It kind of feels like, oh wow. And until you start meeting more people who are also freelancers, then you start to feel like it's more of a normal thing. But like I feel like I don't know if you resonate that, but with that at
Uh-huh.
all.
Yeah, 100% I do.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we talked about last time that you were on the live, but what I think is such a unique kind of offering that you have is your regular office hours with freelancers and business owners to allow them to pick your brain and for you to kind of like also give them guidance with what they're working on. What is something that people ask you in those sections that you wish more people knew?
hmm I think it usually comes back to the basics. Like people want permission that what they're doing is correct and they're not doing something wrong. Like I think we all think like maybe somebody else is actually doing this right and I'm doing it completely wrong. So a lot of times I'm just validating like, no, you do know how to do this. It's okay to charge for that. This is completely normal. Um, Especially when you're working on your own. It's hard to find people who are on the same path as you to even get that validation that like you're not crazy and you're not a total imposter or you're not doing everything wrong. So we do a lot of that kind of work of being like, yes, you're on the right track. Here's how to refine it a little bit. And people also don't really have a sense of what their rate should be. I think everybody's used to a salaried job saying, we can offer you $80,000. And I'm going, does that sound good to me? But I think freelance really commands that you figure out what is your marketable value and then how much money do you want to make? And how many hours does that mean you're going to work? And starting to think like that is a lot of what we do in session two. So definitely those two, like validating you're on your path, you're doing it right, just keep experimenting and figuring out what are your services actually worth.
Yeah, and I love how it feels like that also naturally kind of dovetails with what you were talking about when we hopped on, which is this idea of like listening to your sense of intuition and getting in
Mhm.
touch with like what grounds you and what you want. When you're having conversations with freelancers, particularly newer freelancers,
Mhm.
what do you think that these newer beginner freelancers are struggling with the most right now, and that maybe they're not even truly aware of?
Yeah. I think when people think, am I going to go freelance? They think I have to quit my job and like overhaul my entire life, or it's this big decision between full time or freelance and what identity am I going to have? I really encourage everybody to just get one client first. And it can be like your mom's friend or your dad's business or helping your sister launch something. Like, really cut your teeth on those types of projects first and get in the muscle of, I have a meeting with the person. What are they looking for? How can I go away and manage my own time to get this done? I think a big um, thing you need to start managing yourself is your time and your follow through as a freelancer. A lot of people don't have that in them. They're used to someone giving them a deadline or, even operating under pressure, or they're going to get in trouble if they don't do it. But if it's your business, you have to be like, I want to get this done. I want to deliver it in a timely manner. I'm going to learn how to manage my time in a way that feels good for me, in a way that's professional. And then doing the work, delivering the project, receiving feedback, deciding when the project's complete, and then when is it time to start a new one? Or when does your hourly rate click on after a project? So really taking on those like little test projects that are not sexy, and it's not like your dream brand and you're not making $1 million, but you're getting in the muscle of working with a client, following through, and then getting those under your belt. So then you're slowly building your confidence. And when it comes time to work with a bigger client, you've got it because you've done it a couple of times on smaller things.
I love that. And one of the things that I think that really kind of helped me kind of realize that freelancing was like worth it in the beginning was this idea of like the small luxuries of the freelance life. Like one of the things was I remember when I was trapped in like a corporate office job, like I was just inside all day, no sunshine. And I remember the first time that I went freelance and was dabbling in that in between TV shows, I remember being able to go to a museum's like outdoor cafe and write in the sunshine at like
Yeah.
2 p.m. and then go wander around the museum. For you, what was like one of those little luxuries when you started as a freelancer that just hooked you and you're like, oh man, I cannot go back to like a corporate job where I'm sitting for 8 hours inside?
Oh my gosh. For me, it's really been learning how to honor my energy. And that means working at different times. Like, I'm never going to be a 9 to 5 girl. I'm always going to be like deciding to wake up early and bust out everything in the morning, or, going to Pilates in the afternoon, or deciding I want to take a shower at 11 a.m. and then like doing all of my work in the evening. And so actually, that was one of the biggest reasons I felt like I needed to go freelance anyways, is because I have so much energy to give, but it's not always in the same 8 hour window. And once I got a sense that I can optimize my time and get my work done in a way that works for me, and it doesn't mean I need to be on Slack for 8 hours a day, and I am still going to get it done, but I may want to get it done on Sunday afternoon, or I may want to get it done early in the morning, or I might feel like taking a shower in the middle of doing the project. Like, that flow has really worked for me, and I can't imagine like putting on an outfit and being stuck somewhere for 8 hours and not being able to like go where the spirit moves me, or being forced to output during a certain window of time. So basically, like the freedom to output when I have the energy to do it is the biggest luxury for me in terms of being a freelancer.
I think that's great, especially because it really dives into, especially us freelancers who are very creative and the creative freelancer path, which is very, very different than some of the freelance paths that some people might take that is more of like coding or accounting or things like that. Like we do have to be aligned with that
Mhm.
energy. One thing that I think a lot of the newer freelancers who maybe haven't gone full time freelance are curious about is like, what is a week in your life like? Do you have regular routines in your week? Or is it again kind of like you were describing, totally free flow and you're just kind of scheduling each week as it comes?
So I have clients that I work with consistently where I am sort of a fractional team member and I have meetings. So they definitely add guardrails around my time because I know, for instance, every week I have like 3 meetings that I'm always going to attend, or there's certain deliverables that I'm going to bring to the table every week. So it helps me to have kind of an anchor client like that where I'm staying of performing a role. And then I get the projects and personal work done in the time around that. Um, but like I wake up early in the morning, I have breakfast, I go on a walk. I usually sit down around 9 a.m. and like respond to Slack from my clients or do emails. But I'm just not glued to having to be there during that time or having to output during that time, like I said. And I find my days are mostly more like meetings and networking and connecting with people. And then I find flow time to like write or design or really sit down and like bang out a strategy during quiet hours, like whether it's morning, evening, or weekend. That's usually when I'm getting done, like heads down work.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about anchor clients before, about when people are going real full-time freelance for the first time, try to pick that one client that covers the bills. And I think that was such a great strategy that you shared with us in that last slide. The other question that I would have for you off of this is, I know that you have a course, How to Go Freelance. What do you feel like is one of the most valuable sections of the course, whether that's a broad topic or something that you walked people through that you feel like maybe isn't instantly obvious to a beginner?
Yeah. Um, a really helpful section is definitely the scope of work and learning how to explain your services in a way that makes people want to pay for them. And a lot of times somebody will just say, "Oh, I'm a social media manager. Pay me to do social media management." But the client might not know what goes into that type of role. So really getting clear on, it's social media management, which means, the overall strategy, the daily execution, and then even down to the nitty gritty, the writing of the captions, responding to DMs, like, uploading to stories, adding links that click back to the site, like learning how to describe your work, I think really commands more money and value for it. And two people can be doing the same thing, but one person can make it sound like a lot more work and a lot more strategy and a lot more in depth. So, for new freelancers, especially, them understanding the process that they're doing naturally and explaining them to the clients through the light that makes them want to pay more money for it is really big. So I have one section called Turn Your Skills into Services, where you're taking inventory on like, what can I do? And how do I turn that into marketable services that make people want to pay for it? Which means it's not just copywriting, it's, website copy, product description, social media copy, email copy, like really getting down to what are the business case uses for my services, and then figuring out how to scope that in a way that commands the rate that you want to make for it.
That's really helpful. And one of the things that we saw, we recently put out a rate transparency report on Make Writing Your Job and surveying a bunch of writers about how they work. And it was about half and half of writers who worked both full, like in terms of like their hourly rate, like that was how they work with clients, versus the other half were working per deliverable. So I love this idea of scoping out the work, because especially for writers who and freelancers in general who are working on a fixed rate, as so important and valuable. But my next question is, you've built a freelance life that includes this like flexibility, this financial abundance. Like, what do you think that people misunderstand about what it takes to create the level of balance that you found in your life between work and socializing and personal life and networking on all of the things that you're up to?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, from like just the abundance and business perspective, um, freelancers need to start to see themselves as a business rather than just like somebody going from gig to gig, because you're never going to have a business you're happy with unless you spend some time thinking more strategically about how much money you want to make, how that's even possible for you, what types of clients would you need to put together or stack on top of each other or win to maintain the lifestyle you want to have. If you want to have a life where you're traveling all the time or where you're going out to dinner all the time or whatever, you kind of need to plan for that in the way that you're like, okay, then I need to make this much money. And how is that possible with the skills that I have? So a lot of times people have a salary job and they know they're making 100K and they're like, okay, how do I live off 100K? As a freelancer, you have the opportunity to be like, I want to design this life. How much does this life cost? And like, how do I want to save for the future in that? So I love that it can be like a way to design your life and actually create that if you proactively think about how you're going to make the amount of money that feels good for you. So I would definitely say that as a number one, stop everything you're doing and think about what you're creating.
That's awesome. Now, after a decade of freelancing, because you're an experienced creative freelancer, what advice would you give to your younger self or beginner writers about money, about pacing yourself, or about self worth and setting rates?
hmm Um, I think mentioned this in our last live, but definitely getting more strict about things you're doing for free and for trade, and making sure that 80% of your time is spent on things that are paying you a rate that you feel good about, not like everybody's on a discount, right? You need to have some sense of, my time costs $50 an hour or whatever it is, and that is my minimum. And I'm not going to dip down to $30 an hour for anybody. And then making sure that 80% of your time is working at that rate. And then you have some time open to help that person or move forward with that opportunity that might lead to something else down the road. So I would definitely check her on how many favors she's doing.
Yeah, and then and I love this idea. I know this came up last time about trying to figure out how to set boundaries about getting paid for your work. Because as a freelancer, that's kind of how we make money. It's like getting paid for our work. But how do you balance the and this is something that I've heard from a lot of freelancers. How do you balance working for clients and being paid, but also building your own thing? Because you're on
Mhm.
social media, you have this entire ecosystem with how to go freelance, and that isn't something that takes time and energy to build. How do you balance those things of working for others and working for yourself?
Yeah. Um, I'm still figuring it out, but building for myself is something that I know is more of a long-term investment. And there are other things that feel good about it besides making money. Like, I love that I'm creating this body of work and I can look at it and be like, wow, I've posted hundreds of times last year. Like, that's amazing. It's sort of like doing an extracurricular in school growing up where it's something that you're really getting better at and working the muscle and you're making new friends doing it. And there's so much more upside to building your personal brand than just making money. And making money can be the happy side effect of putting in the time and building the community. And that's also what's going to resonate more with an audience and make them want to buy from you because you're not out there like trying to take something from them, trying to take money, trying to take time, trying to take energy. Instead, you're out there giving and of sharing and being a friend. And I think that's how some of the best brands and like influencer type businesses are built because it's fun and because it's value additive. Um, I would say you know, 60% of my time is spent on client work and 40% of my time is spent on me work. And I tend to feel anxious when it's like time to write another Substack, like I have this
Mm.
feeling in my body, like I'm like, you have to do this. And I honor that. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna do this. And then once I push it out, I feel so much better. So I feel like I kind of have this internal clock around it too, where my body tells me like, we're going to stay on top of this. Like, we're not going to fall off the ball. And a lot of people start personal brands or projects and they'll do it once or twice and then completely abandon it and then carry around all the shame that, like, I used to do that or I started doing it, but I never got back to it. I really made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to do that with this, and that I was really going to honor, myself and my talents and my follow through and my community. And I feel really proud for sticking to it.
It's very impressive what you built. And Katrina in the comments said, making money being the frosting on top, perhaps. And I love that idea of like making sure that you're making things that feel fulfilling. And yeah, I have some more questions for you, but just want to let everybody know in the chat if you have questions for Grace, you want to drop down below, feel free. But I'll keep on moving through my questions. Building off of what you just said, Grace, I think that you have such a great presence on social media. Exactly what you were saying. It doesn't feel like you're just like out here taking, you're truly being generous. You're giving away a lot of information for free. What tips do you have for people who are especially writers and creatives who maybe are a little bit more,
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to put themselves out there without selling themselves? Like
Yeah.
what would you recommend for them building their personal brand in 2026?
hmm In 2026, I feel like it's all about being yourself. And it doesn't have to be like every unhinged corner of your life, but whatever your focus area is, like instead of being so contrived around like what content should I produce, like bring us on the journey with you. I think like some of the Substack notes that I posted that resonate the most, it's something I'm thinking about rather than something I'm trying to create content about, So it's like, I just had this interaction with someone, or I've been thinking about how this informs that. It's like bringing people into the process so they can understand how you think, so they can be like, oh, I think that way too. Um, it's funny, the other day, I realized that, like, I hadn't spent, like, the New Year week doing any New Year stuff at all. Like, I wanted to, like, film all these TikToks and get ahead on Substacks and, like, reimagine my website, and, like, that was gonna be a really fun week for me to do it, and I didn't feel like doing it at all. And then I was, like, coming back to work and, like, coming back to Substack after a week off, and instead of, like, trying to come up with something about New Year, New You, I made some note of, like, fully had the intention of doing this week, didn't do it at all. I guess it all commences this week. And that resonated way harder because everybody else was like, oh my God, me too. Thank God you're saying this. Like, if you bring people into your inner world in an authentic way, it creates conversation and it builds community. And so whenever I'm sort of like pressed for like, what do I share or post? I'm like, oh yeah, I just have to share what I'm thinking about authentically. And that ends up resonating.
Yeah, that's something that I've been hearing from a lot of people of like the trend for 2026 is just being yourself. And
Yes.
I think that I love that. I'm here for that. And I think that that's great. And so often, we've been exposed to very crafted online personal brands. But I think that what also makes you so very kind of like relatable to a lot of people is that you're just being you and you're
Mhm.
sharing the things that you've learned. And in the comments, Duncan says, thank you for sharing. And then Michelle asks, do you have any insight on persevering through the slower seasons and also preparation for filing taxes? So I know you're not a CPA and you can't give tax
Uh-huh.
advice, but what would you recommend to people dealing with either the anxiety and the frustration of taxes or dealing with a slower season in their freelancing business?
I find a lot of times financial anxiety comes because we're avoiding it. And if we'll just sit down, open our credit cards, look at what's going on, like a lot of people don't even know their credit card balance because they're like avoiding it so much. And I try to make it a practice, especially with my own business, of like every week I open up my bank account, I look at my credit cards, I see what's going on, I check that I've invoiced everyone. Like, first, just having some mastery and awareness about like what's going on for you and stopping avoiding it. That's also going to help keep you out of debt. It's going to keep you more up to date with like, what am I spending on and do I need these things? So that is what I would recommend first and foremost. Um, I work with a bookkeeper and an accountant. And if you're a freelancer, you need expenses. Like, you are going to be so grateful to have spent a couple grand on those resources at the end of the year when you have to pay all of these taxes. So much rather pay somebody to do your taxes for you. So if you can swing it, I would definitely recommend an accountant, a bookkeeper, or both. Um, and then I just did this exercise 2 weeks ago where, on top of, the business expenses that pulled into my QuickBooks from my business credit card, I opened up all of my credit card statements and I went through every single month on every single card and made a spreadsheet and listed out everything that I had spent that could count as a business expense that I could pass to my accountant. And it was so good because I realized like all these things I was spending money on that I could stop and subscriptions that I could cancel. And I also managed to come up with a lot of creative expenses that I could send her way. So I guess my answer is like empower yourself by taking your awareness and your autonomy back by figuring out what's going on. And that will really help the anxiety dissipate. And then you can come up with a plan of action. Like, let's say you get everything in your awareness, and then you're like, ugh, I owe all this money or I have to do this thing. At least you know so that you can make a game plan on it. That's way less anxiety inducing than sitting in the space of not knowing.
No, that's really good advice. And I think that for a lot of us, when we finally do the task we've been putting off, it sometimes only takes 15 minutes.
Oh my
Maybe
God.
not all of tax prep, but sometimes there's just one thing. And in the chat, Amy says, great comments about notes and more. And then Shivam asks, how do you develop a deep relationship with your client who doesn't listen to you or is a bit of a know-it-all and same time as your ideal client? I think kind of like a bigger, broader question here is, Grace, how do you deal with difficult clients? How do you like, when do you know when to drop a client? This is
Mhm.
a question I hear a lot from freelancers is like, when do you break up with a client or at what point do you realize it's not a right fit?
Yeah, I think having a couple of discovery calls where you ask a lot of questions and try and get a sense of the client's personality, their pain points, and figuring out what do they actually want out of this project. Like a lot of times somebody wants to launch a brand, but what they really want is to be known or to like build their ego or their presence. Like kind of understanding the psychological need of the client will help you meet that when you present your work, right? So if you get a sense that like they want to start this brand because they want to express their voice because they felt they were never heard. Having that in mind will help you make different branding decisions than if you're just sort of like arbitrarily designing something pretty. So, understanding the client from the jump, then even if it's a difficult client personality, you can understand how to manage that the way you present things, right? Like, let's say you designed a logo and then you bring the logo to the table and you say, I know that you want to come across elevated and sophisticated. So that's why I chose this serif font, and I know that you want to be in the same class as, Vogue. So that's why it's black and white and we're going to lay it on top of photography. Like, I think you can navigate any client dynamic so long as you know what their needs are and then you more strategically present to hit those needs. I think a lot of people get hung up on their own creative ego and they're like, well, I think this is best or I think this looks good. Like you have to drop that and be like, the client's needs come first. They're paying me. Like if you want to do your own like creative direction thing, then like do it for yourself and build your own brand so people start hiring you for your taste. But if you're not hired for your taste and you're just hired to be an executor or a strategic partner to someone who wants to bring something to life, then you sort of need to defer your ego and figure out how to present to the client's needs.
That's a great description of how freelancers can really lead into like the customer service aspect of the job that is quite difficult. And I
Uh-huh.
and I just want to agree with you and agree with everything that you're saying and add on and say I feel like the client is always right, but I sometimes feel like the client's not always right for you or for us as freelancers.
100%.
Where
Yeah.
I feel like it's like they're right. Like I feel like if I'm butting heads with somebody or if it's like
Uh-huh.
too far away, it's hard to kind of
It's
like
too
bridge
hard.
that gap. And I think that's really great.
Can I grab my
Yeah,
charger 1 second?
yeah, of course.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I don't want it to die on you. Yeah,
No,
let
yeah, I
me
had this
feel.
problem earlier. Yeah, go for it.
Putting your light off. Okay.
Oh, hello. Yeah, earlier when I was starting the Substack live earlier today, Kyle knows this. I was like, oh yeah, like I will definitely have enough battery life for a few of these Substack lives. And then the first one it almost died and I had to get my phone attached.
I know.
It's just like it's such a funny thing to be like, oh yes.
It's
These
gonna
things take a
die.
lot of battery.
It really does. I think I had solid battery before we started. Okay, I'm
What's
back.
your dog's name?
Donnie.
Oh,
Yeah,
cute.
he's the
Okay,
best.
great. The
And
next
another
question.
benefit of freelancing is you can have an animal and actually spend time with them.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is so much better, especially for dog owners, being able to go on a walk with your dog during the day. It kind of is like the two for one of spending time with your pet and also getting outside in the sunshine.
100%. Yeah.
So the next question that I have for you, actually, before I dive into the next question, I just want to let everybody know that Grace has been so kind to be giving away one comped 12-month subscription to How to Go Freelance. And as part of that giveaway, the question that we have for you guys is if you want to drop in the chat in one sentence, what's one way you've actively chose freedom in your work right now, whether that's dabbling in freelance, getting started, and I'm going to ask Grace some more questions, but then I'm going to give her the chance to read through the chat and pick the winner of a comped annual subscription to her excellent Substack, How to Go
Amazing.
Freelance. So thank you, Grace, for giving that away. That's
Yeah.
very kind of you. So the next question that I have for you, Grace, is from Kyle in the chat. Looking back to this time last year, what felt most worth your attention in the business and what experiments did you run? How did they
Mhm.
turn out and what do you want to test in 2026?
This time last year, I was actually letting go of a client that I felt that I couldn't provide value for anymore. And it was tough because they didn't see me that way. But when I looked at the business, I was like, I've given everything that I have to give here. I don't think any suggestion I make is going to make an impact to them. And it was good money and I liked the founder and everything like that. But I was sort of in this space where I had to make a decision in my integrity and be like, they can find someone who's so much more excited about this than me, that brings fresh ideas to the table. And that's an interesting point with any client and any job that you might get to where you're like, I've given all that I have to give here. Like, it's not you, it's me. And I think somebody else could breathe fresh energy into this company. And it would be more impactful than what I could give. And knowing that, like, what else does the universe have for me that I'll enjoy more, that I can add more value to, where I can learn more? Um, and so I was in this funny spot last year where I was like, okay, am I going to let go of this income and trust that it'll be replaced by something else that I enjoy more, where I can make a bigger impact? So that was all of those things. It was an experiment. It was something I was thinking through. It also really put me in the mindset of my freelance community because I was like, oh my God, I'm stepping into an income gap and I'm doing it on purpose. And I'm not going to not do it because I'm afraid, because I do trust that I can find something else that will replace the income. So I was moving through a lot of fear around it. I was moving through feeling like, am I going to let people down? Am I in the middle of a project? Just moving through all of that kind of stuff. And finally, I spoke up and I said something. And it turned out there was another consultant on the team who was like chomping at the bit to take my job. And I was like, incredible. And I like onboarded this woman, and she had the correct previous experience, and she had fresh energy to give it. And it was like, what blesses one blesses all. She got to
Mhm.
take over my role. I got to like scope back, and they were still paying me a little bit of money. And then I found another client that completely replaced the income. So sometimes just like speaking up and being honest about where you're at is going to work out best for everyone. It didn't end up in like me just like, leaving them in the lurch and them being upset and me having no income. Like, we found a really nice phase out plan. Now I'm so much happier with what I'm doing now than if I had stayed on board and just sort of like let all my energy go to that thing.
And that speaks to the abundance mindset that you have, which is
Hmm.
so great. And I think that a lot of us freelancers, like myself included, especially in the early days of freelancing, where we're like, oh, am I going to get a client ever again in my
Yeah.
entire life?
Uh-huh.
Like that. And like sometimes, like even like us experienced freelancers sometimes feel that we're like, is this the last client I will ever work with?
Totally.
And then I will be broke and starving forever.
A
And
hundred
so it's
percent.
like, I love like how a lot of the things that you talk about come back to this idea of like really trying to think about like that mindset. So I have one last question for you, and I know everybody's leaving some great comments in the chat
Amazing.
below. And just in 1 minute, Grace will go ahead and pick the winner after this question. And for those of you who are just joining, in one sentence, what's one way you're actively choosing freedom in your work right now? Grace is going to be giving away a comped annual paid subscription on how to go freelance to one winner below. Thank you, Grace. And then last question for you, Grace. If someone who is listening right now wants more freedom from their work, but feels overwhelmed to start, what's one small concrete step that they can take this month?
Hmm. You mean like if they have a current full-time job or if they're freelancing and are workaholics?
We'll say they're freelancing and they're workaholics, because I know we've talked about beginners a little bit. So if somebody's
Yeah.
freelancing, they're overwhelmed, they're juggling a lot right now. Maybe they already
Hmm.
have clients. Like, what kind of small step would you recommend for them?
Okay. I have realized recently that a lot of times it's not my work keeping me glued to the computer. It's my addiction to checking things. Like, it has a new message come through. Do I need to respond to this? Like, twiddling my thumbs, trying to get a strategy done when I don't have any energy to do it at that moment. Like, giving yourself permission to step away from the computer and from your work when there's no work to do right now, either because you don't have the energy to do it, you don't have the information that you need to get the thing done, um, or because you need to take a break. And instead of just sitting there, I think like we all have that like old corporate energy of like, I have to sit here so I'm not guilty of not working. Like, you need to release that and figure out, what do I have to do for the week? When am I going to do it at the times that I have energy to do it? And then if I'm sitting there and honestly doing nothing, I'm going to go take a walk. That's going to be way more
Hmm.
energizing and productive. You're going to get great ideas on your walk. You're going to meet up with someone, have an inspiring phone call. I have to remind myself of that all the time. If I'm not getting anything done, then it's not serving anyone for me to sit here. So that's like instantly, I'm sure all of us can find one moment this week where we're twiddling our thumbs, sitting there with writer's block or whatever, and instead we could go take a walk.
I love that. And in the chat, Beth Kaplan says, I love this so much. Thank you for this. So I'm going to give you a minute, Grace, to go through some of the amazing responses people left. And you can go ahead and pick the winner for the giveaway. And thanks again for giving away 1 month paid subscription, or sorry, 1 year annual subscription to How to Go Freelance. And while you're doing that,
Yes.
I will talk a little bit about some announcements. For those of you, if you're new to the live stream today, this is hour 8 of my live stream for my new book, Write for Money and Power. We're trending as a #1 Amazon bestseller right now today. So thank you for all of your help. And the next guest that I have on, and like a little over 20 minutes, is Roxy, and she is a writer, podcaster, creator. She is started as a celebrity makeup artist, and we're talking at 3 p.m. Pacific time about how she made a career leap, reinvented herself, and created her own personal brand. So really excited for that. It's been a really fun day of a lot of really cool conversations. And if you missed any of the live streams up until this point of the 12-hour launch, you can go to Pseudoscience or Make Writing Your Job to catch those. But Grace, whenever you're ready, I know there's a lot of people who like left
I know. I
giveaway
feel
responses.
bad.
So take your
It's gonna
time if
be
you
it's
need.
gonna be a universe choice because it's hard to scroll down here. Okay, how about Amy Schmidt?
Amazing. What was Amy Schmidt's response? If you want to read a little bit of it for the group.
Okay, I already lost it in the thread.
Oh, no worries. I know there's a lot going on
Amy
here.
Schmidt.
I'll see if I can find it.
Oh, here it is. My
Okay,
new
cool.
habit to support my freelance status has been to schedule in something fun, creative, and inspiring to do at least once a week because having that full time corporate gig does not allow for this freedom. 100%. That is a great answer, and we all need to do that this week.
Amazing. Well, congratulations to Amy Schmidt. If you can DM Grace your email address to get your annual paid subscription to her publication, How to Go Freelance. And for everybody else, if you're not subscribed to How to Go Freelance, go do that right now. It's a really great publication. And Grace does co-working, has an amazing course. Grace, is there anything else that you want to share before we hop off, where people can find you? Anything that you're planning? Anything you want people to know?
Yeah. Well, as a part of my Substack benefits, we're doing monthly QA. So next Wednesday, there's one. We all hop on Zoom. Everybody asks their questions. I'll answer. And then the group will also provide answers, which is really cool. So I'm excited about that. And then you can find me on Instagram, How to Go Freelance. And then I'm on TikTok, ask_Grace. And I make a lot of video content as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for joining. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank everybody for tuning in.
Congrats on your book. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.